Welcome to the Go Get Great podcast, the perfect spot for aspiring entrepreneurs and ambitious small business owners. I'm Brittany, your host, an online marketing strategist and mom of 5. Here you'll discover how to start or scale your small business with practical marketing and business strategies that even the busiest entrepreneurs can implement. But we don't just stop at business insight, because we know that what you do when you're not wearing your entrepreneur hat is just as important to the success of your business. As a fellow mom, I understand the importance of having a space for real talk where we share the relatable, messy moments of balancing motherhood and a business. So let's dive in and start your journey from good to great. If you've been following me on my personal account at Brittany N. Miller _, you might know that I am now officially a published author. But beyond that, I am in fact an Amazon #1 best-selling author in the women in business and entrepreneurship category. What? Totally mind blowing, this entire experience. So I wanted to dedicate an entire podcast episode to talking about what that is, because as much as this has been on my vision board for many years, it's not something that I really thought was going to be happening in my life for quite some time. But truthfully speaking, writing a book, or in my case, a chapter in a co-authored book, was a little bit easier than I was expecting it to be. So if you have the itch to maybe write a book or become part of a co-authored book journey, then this episode is going to be of a lot of value to you, because I'll talk about the process. But even if not, there's still going to be some really interesting information for you. So I hope that you'll stick around until the end. So I wanted to start by talking about what inspired me to say yes to the project. So if you haven't been following me and you're like, you wrote a book, what are you talking about? Well, let me give you a little bit of background information. In the late spring, early summer of 2025, I put my hand up and said that I was interested in writing in a co-author book called Success Redefined that was going to be published by Amanda Wilson Chiochi, the owner of the Monarch & Co., who also has a publishing house, the Monarch & Co. Publishing, I believe, which I will link in the show notes for you, because if you're looking to write a book, I highly recommend working with them. The entire process was just absolutely fabulous from start to finish. I felt so supported. And truthfully speaking, as a first-time author, I was very nervous, and they just made it so easy, like legitimately so easy. Guys, it's easier to write a book with them than it is to figure out what I'm feeding my family of 5 every night for dinner. Uh, so Amanda pitched this idea about a book talking about how we as women, and or women in business, because it had kind of a personal lens, but also a business focus as well. Um, how we were redefining success on our own terms, and how things were the traditional definition of success, go to school, get a job, work 9 to 5 until you retire, is not really working for a lot of people nowadays. But there also isn't a lot of people out there kind of talking about how they're doing things differently. Yes, we see entrepreneurs. Yes, we know that there have always been small business owners, but no one's really talking about how you kind of realize that that traditional definition of success doesn't work for you, and then kind of what to do about it after. So that was what the book was about. There's 11 of us in total that contributed one chapter each to the book, Amanda included and myself included. And we each in our chapter talk about our own stories of how we realized that that definition of success just didn't work for us anymore, and then kind of what we've done about it. So it's an absolutely fantastic read. I just finished going through it, and everyone's story is just so incredible and powerful and moving and inspiring. So if you are feeling like you're just interested in reading the book, I will link it in the show notes for you so that you can grab a copy of it. If you all purchase it through my website, because it is available on Amazon, but if you purchase it through my website, I also have a whole bunch of bonuses that you'll get with it, including an exclusive podcast episode, a Success Redefined workbook to help you figure out what success actually looks like for you. I also have a book club discussion guide, which is free. You don't have to purchase the book for that. And then you will also receive a signed copy of the book from me that I will mail out to you. So lots of fantastic bonuses if you're interested. And if you're feeling like, you know what, this really resonates, and I'm thinking maybe I need to rethink what I'd like out of my life, then there's going to be so many incredibly powerful and moving stories in this book for you. Uh, so when she put out the call, I knew deep down that I wanted to be an author. Um, mostly because when she published her last book, One Decision Away, which I've also read and is absolutely incredible, I felt so much jealousy. And as weird as that sounds, I have now learned and redefined what jealousy to me means. Because before it used to just be this uncomfortable feeling that I thought made me a bad person. But now what I've realized is that jealousy actually means that there is some element of unmet desire that I have about that person or that situation or that thing that they've done that I didn't realize that I wanted. So she published this book, One Decision Away. And I was so jealous that I was not able to contribute to it because it was just and also incredibly inspirational and moving book as well. So when she put out the call for this one, I was like, I'm in. I'm 100% in. If you will have me, I want to write in this book. And then the more we learned about the topic, I was like, this is so perfectly aligned because if you know me, and I'm assuming you know me at least a little bit to be listening to this podcast episode, you know that traditional is not a word that anyone would ever use to describe me, like at all. Not in life, not in business, not in my journey to anything, which is fine. I'm totally okay with that. Uh, so it really gave me an opportunity to kind of dive into some of that and talk about, where all of that came from and how I learned to basically throw the word traditional out the window and kind of do things in my own way and be very confident about doing that because it did not come easy. It really did not. And I don't want to spoil too much about what I talk about in my chapter. So I'm going to try not to say too much more about that. But that is more or less what I'm talking about. There are some business elements in it because redefining success, my business is part of that, but it was also more of kind of my personal journey. Um, so yeah, so like I said, when she put out the call for this, I was like, heck yes, I want to write. I want to write. I want to be an author. It had been on my vision board for so many years. Didn't think it was going to be something that I was going to be able to do in the short term because sitting down to write, an entire book feels very overwhelming. We've been in a very continuously busy season of life for an extended period of time. And I just didn't think that I had the capacity to sit down and write a book. But when she was like, co-authored, you only write one chapter, I was like, I can do that. I can definitely do that. If I can write a blog post, I can write a chapter in a book. So I was like, sign me up. When do we start? So that was last spring, fall. People were accepted as authors into the book because you have to like apply for it, which is kind of cool, interesting, and also very nerve wracking. And then by kind of like the end of summer, we knew that we would be writing in the book. And then we kind of started the writing process from the fall until December is when we had to submit our final chapter of 2025. So December of 2025, that wrapped up. And then January until June when it launched, because it launched last month. That was all like waiting, editing, revising, marketing, all of those fun things. So this has been something that's actually been on the go with me for a very long time. And I haven't talked about it much uh, for a lot of reasons, which I may dive into a little bit more. But it is something that I've done, and I'm so excited, and I cannot wait to talk about it more. Um, so that's why I said yes to the project. I did talk a little bit about the writing journey already, but what the writing process was actually like, because I feel like if you're interested in writing a book, that's probably one of the things that you're like, can I do it? And the answer is yes, absolutely you can. Anyone can write. Whether or not you write well is probably something that your inner critic is telling you that you may not be doing, but you probably are. But the beautiful thing about working with the Monarch Publishing House, and one of the reasons why I recommend that over doing a self-published book through Amazon is because they have a fantastic team that's there to kind of teach you how to write a really good chapter and then also help you edit the chapter after you're done writing it so that when someone sits down to read it, not only does it make sense and really move them through what they call a story arc, because they brought a professional in whose name presently escapes me, and I feel really guilty about that because I learned so much from him. But I'll try and link his information in the show notes below because if you do want to co-op or if you do want to write your own book and self-publish outside of a publishing house, you could hire him to teach you to walk you through the story arc process. Um, so I learned all about story arcs and like how to format a chapter to kind of move someone through a journey and a story and an experience in a way that makes sense and is logical. So that was really helpful. And then after that, like I said, once you kind of submit your initial draft, to the editors will go through and edit and be like, "Oh, we really like this section, but maybe we wanna move that up to the beginning because that's actually, like, a really strong kind of emotional pull," or, "Let's add some other information and examples here." So, like I said, fully supported through the entire journey. I felt like I, like, did not have a question the entire time because they're always like, "Okay, and this is how it's gonna be, and this is what you're gonna do, and this is how we're gonna help you." And it was so handheld. Honestly, I felt a little bit like a toddler, but like in the best way. Like I said, first time author, never written anything before, and they were really great at guiding me through that process. So I also wanted to kind of talk about the thing that surprised me most about becoming a published author. Uh, I think there were a couple things here too. For starters, the most surprising thing was that we hit Amazon #1 bestseller literally on launch day before we even made it to the stage to do our panel discussion and talk about the book. We had already sold so many copies that we were able to kind of acquire that title, which was incredible, but very surprising. So that was kind of one of the big things for me. I mentioned this earlier too, but it was actually a lot easier to write than I was expecting. Definitely have the writer's bug now. And then just in general, being able to kind of put it out there in the world and share it with people, which is a nerve-wracking experience in and itself. But seeing how my community responded to it and was excited for it and celebrating me through the process was really surprising and incredible too. And I'm very grateful to everyone, including you guys who are listening now, anyone who's purchased the book, etc., etc. Even if you haven't purchased it, but you like to post about it, I really, really appreciate all of that. I felt very nervous going into kind of the marketing phase of it, um, because of some negative internal dialogue that I had, which I was going to talk about next anyway, about the hardest part of writing my chapter. And truthfully speaking, the hardest part was not actually the writing. It was actually overcoming all of the mental roadblocks to do the writing. So I knew, like I said, from a jealousy perspective, that there was some unmet need that I wanted to write in the book. I wanted to be a published author. I said yes. And then I actually got accepted. And I'm like, wait a minute, what happened? What am I doing? Who am I? Like a barely 30-year-old, who am I to be talking about redefining success? We're in the middle of a home renovation. At the time, I was still pregnant with Orion, baby number 5. Now we're pregnant with I was still relatively new in the realm of business. Like my business isn't even technically 5 years old yet. And I'm like, who am I to talk about what success looks like? And there was just so much, inner criticism that I was feeling. And truthfully speaking, even though we had from September to December to write the chapter, I, showed up to the meetings, I learned, did the trainings, but I procrastinated on the actual sitting down and writing because I needed time to work through those mental roadblocks of being like, no, you know what? I am qualified, quote unquote, to write about this because I have been able to do X, Y, and Z in my life, in my business because of the excuse me, because of the decisions I've made, and that makes me successful. So that was the hardest part for me, overcoming all of that. And then sitting down to kind of write about it felt easier after I overcame that, but then seeing my community support me really helped, instill that validation that I had that, you know what, I am, again, we're going to say quote unquote qualified to write about all of this. So I really, really appreciated that. Deeply grateful. Yeah, so that was what surprised me the most and also the hardest part about writing my chapter. One other like caveat about the hardest part of writing my chapter, it was actually just like paring it down because we had literally the only criteria was that it had to be under, I think it was 3,000 words, which I have wrote English essays that are longer than that. I'm like, "What do you mean? What do you mean only 3,000 words? How am I supposed to, like, explain my entire life and the decisions that have impacted me and got me from, A to Z in 3,000 words?" So, I found that to be very challenging. I found it very challenging to figure out, what was the most important thing to include in the chapter to really get my point across about success, and how do I share stories and examples that support that without talking too much and going on a tangent and confusing the audience and all of those other things. So like I said, very grateful to have the story arc framework to follow and also to have the editors help me, because I think the chapter that I submitted as my initial draft was over the word count, and I was like, you know what, they'll tell me what's good and what should stay and what needs to come out, and they did, and they were very great about it. So that was kind of the other half of the hard part about the actual writing, just being very concise about the story that I was telling, because I am not a concise person. This is probably going to be a very long podcast episode, like every single other episode I talk about, because I talk a lot. Yeah. So another question that I kind of wanted to like, or thing that I wanted to talk about, is what emotions came up while I was writing. So there was so much. So we talked about the negative inner critic that I was dealing with while I was going through like the pre-writing and writing process. Um, but through the actual writing process, there were tears of sadness, there were tears of joy, there was excitement, there was nerves, like literally the whole rainbow of emotions, you guys. Writing an author is not, or becoming an author and writing is not something that you should do lightly unless you're ready to address all of those emotions and work through them all individually, because they really will all impact you in some way. And you may not realize it. You may start down to write, and that was one of the things that they taught you in the story arc framework workshops and things like that. The writing process, excuse me, is you have to write um, from the scar, not the wound, is kind of how they phrase that. So basically, don't write about the things that you're still dealing with and addressing, because it's going to be too raw, too emotional. Write from a place of being healed and what you learned about the experience, because it's easier in that sense. But that still doesn't mean that it doesn't bring up emotions again, because it 100% does. But in the best way. It really helped me work through some of those things. So it was really just great to be like broken open in that way and kind of see it come to life. And I'm very proud of, like I've probably mentioned before, very proud of how it turned out. And I hope that if you've read it already, you'll think that I did a good job writing. And if you haven't, feel free to read it and then let me know what you think. Or even if you have read it, feel free to let me know what you think. You can send me a message on Instagram or email me. Yeah. So lots of emotions that came up through the writing process, but most of them good and for the better. So I asked ChatGPT for a couple questions to do, because I know that if I don't have some sort of structure when I record these, it's just going to be like a 6 hour long tangent. So I'm just looking through some of the questions, and some of them I don't want to answer because it's going to spoil the chapter, for those of you that haven't read it. But one of the questions that it had actually is kind of good, and I wanted to talk about that. So it says, looking back now, would I handle anything differently? And yes, absolutely. There's a lot of things about the process that I would have handled differently, and not necessarily in a bad way. Like, I don't think that I was, irresponsible about the journey of becoming an author. I showed up. I was willing to learn. I took constructive feedback. I hit my deadlines, all of those things. I was the good student. Not to say that others weren't, but like, you know, that was kind of, I came into the experience being open and willing to learn, and also very nervous about what they would tell me. I was very, very concerned that after I submitted my draft, that my pride and my ego were going to take a huge hit, and they were going to come back and be like, you really need to rewrite this. Like a polite way of basically saying, this is crap, start over. I was so, so worried about that, because I had heard from some of the authors that that was what they told them. And I don't mean to say that any of the authors were bad, because every single story in that book was absolutely phenomenal. But they knew that what they submitted was more of like a surface level, and that they were trying to encourage the authors to like go deeper, add more story, add more emotion, talk more about the transformation that they did. Um, so I knew that it was possible, because my chapter wasn't necessarily the first that got edited. So, I kind of heard that from other authors. And even if they honestly had come back and told me that I needed to start from ground zero, I think I probably would have been fine doing it. And I think I would have learned a lot through that experience. But it was a little nice, a little bit of like a pat on the back, that they had truthfully very minor edits, um, to to my chapter in general. My intro, not like an intro, but like the beginning of my chapter, I tried to put too much information in, so they really helped me pare that down, and then they helped me move a section from later back to the beginning because they felt that that was a stronger introduction. And then other than that, they just basically asked for a little bit more details and a couple more examples in a few of the places. So it was like a huge sigh of relief to me that, again, it really came back to age. It's truthfully speaking, I just felt too young to be a published author, which is crazy because I'm sure there are people that are younger than me that have a published book. Well, technically, I think I was 32 when it actually published, but I was only like 31 when I said yes to the journey. And I mean, 30 is not old, but 30 is also not young. So I really didn't technically have any reason for feeling that way other than the fact that I did. So, but looking back, like I was attempting to get to my point of as much as I showed up and I was willing to learn and I did learn and I, followed all the timelines, I really wish that I had like recorded more of that and brought you guys on the journey of the book writing process. Um, because I think that that would have been really fun and interesting for you guys to see and be a part of, but because of my inner critic going, "Are you sure you're not qualified? You shouldn't be doing this." I really didn't. I was just like, "Okay, well, we'll just wait until it's done and then we'll hope that it's good and then we'll share it with people." When really I should have brought you guys along for the journey in the first place. So that's the thing that I would really do differently. And I mean, obviously from like a marketing perspective, I should have created a wait list and I should have talked about it earlier so that I had more people interested in the book because I think for a lot of people it was just like a surprise. I wrote a book, here it is. Because that's kind of how it felt. And as much as I knew I had these things coming up, it was just kind of like a surprise I did this thing because I was still so nervous, even kind of closer to the end of the project where everyone's like, "Yep, this has been edited, this has been approved, we're so excited." The lead author, Amanda, read the chapter about a month or so before we published, and she sent me comments, and they were just so incredibly like wonderful and supportive. And even after all of that, I was still like, I don't know, are people going to resonate with this? Is it really good enough? Because at that point, I hadn't read any of the other authors' chapters. I could have. We all got a copy of the book to review our own chapter in and edits, but I really wanted to wait until I had the physical book tangibly in my hands to read because that's just that's just the type of person that I am. So at the time I was like, well, it might be okay, but everyone else's could be better. And I mean, I still probably feel that way like a little bit, but I also feel now that I've read through the book that truthfully speaking, my chapter doesn't stand out that much as like that much worse than everybody else's. It kind of blends nicely. So thank you, editors. You're gonna fully put that out there on them that they did a good job with that. So that's something that I would definitely do differently. If and when, maybe more of a when, I write another book. I have lots of ideas actually. Um, we'll talk about that in a minute. But I wanted to talk about kind of how becoming an author has changed things for me. So, in addition to just being able to, include in all of my bios, which I now have to go through and redo and rewrite, I'm going to be recording a new intro for Go Get Great after this that says Amazon bestselling author, which is exciting and also annoying for Grayson to have to edit, but exciting enough that I'm going to make him do it anyway. Um, it's really changed how I see myself as an individual. I definitely feel more like accredited, like a little bit more like validated. And I talked about this in my private podcast episode. If you do purchase the book, or if you have purchased, but you purchased on Amazon, you wouldn't necessarily have access to this. But I may be willing to make a little bit of an exception if you're curious about hearing that. But it definitely has changed the way that I look at myself. And I feel a little bit more confident having that, kind of title behind me, published author, Amazon #1 bestseller, all of those things. But it's changed a lot too about how I run my business, which again, I talk about in the private podcast episode, but I'll share kind of a brief synopsis of it here. But I was exclusively like an online business. Like I was a service-based provider. So now that I have like a physical book that I can sell people, I'm now also a product-based business. So I'm learning a lot about marketing and promotions. And like, I know these things and I've done these things for my clients, but doing it for yourself somehow feels different. I still have to go and look into more of like the shipping aspect of it right now. Any of the books that I've sold, I've just been able to like drop off to friends and family kind of thing. But eventually, my hope is that I'll get to ship books to people across Canada and also into the US, Europe, Asia, whatever. Um, so we'll have to like look into like what that looks like and how much it costs to ship and all of those things. So there have been a lot of changes like internally for me and also like from a business perspective too. Um so it's been really cool to see, a very interesting journey. Definitely one that I hadn't budgeted enough time for in advance. So I feel like it's kind of like the aftermath of me going, oh, shoot, I didn't market this well. As a marketing expert, I did not market this well. Because as much as I knew that I needed to like create a page on my website and put some pop-ups up and some banners to promote this, and I really should have created a wait list and like a wait list bonus, and I should have been posting on social media about it more, and like, having an incentive for people to like purchase in the first few days and like all of those things, bonuses for people who purchase through me instead of on Amazon, because I make absolutely $0 from anyone that purchases through Amazon. So like I need to like direct people to my website to purchase my book or I will never see any money from this. And um you may not know this, but like you have to pay to be a published author in the book. So I won't put a specific dollar amount on it because um it may change, and I don't want you to like be like, oh yeah, I could publish a book for, X amount of dollars. Because Amanda's prices, I don't know whether they change or not, but like you have to invest quite a bit to be part of the journey. And that covers, the training of how to write a story, and it covers the marketing and the expenses from like the launch day party and like all of those things. And like I get it. I'm fully willing to invest in all of that. Mostly because I didn't have to worry about handling any of that myself. But now it's like, okay, cool. Well, I've made this very large investment and I would kind of like to recoup some of my costs from it. So I need to like sell and market my own book, which I haven't even been able to do very much post launch, which is like, okay, well, I didn't get it done pre launch. I can do it post launch because I got like on my deathbed sick for 2 weeks after the launch party. Like, I could not do anything. The perks of being pregnant. They didn't wanna give me meds for a very long time, so it took me a long time to recover. But anyway, so I feel like now I'm trying to be like, "Okay, well, now the book's been launched for almost a month, and we're still kind of in, like, initial launch energy mode. We're still recording bonuses and now creating podcast episodes. I've got some ideas for some blog posts. I have some more social content that I wanna create." And it's like all of this should have been done a long time ago, but it hasn't been. And it just, I mean, like, it is what it is. The book is something I should be promoting continuously, ongoing. And I hope to. It's something that I struggle with, maintaining the energy and excitement of posting something. I'm very much like ooh, I'm excited to do it. Okay, now I've done it. What's next kind of person. And I need to get better at sitting in the, ooh, I've done this. I need to tell more people about this kind of situation. Um, because like I'll post something about being pregnant, and I feel like I've been talking about this for like 6 months now, and I'll still have people go, "Oh my God, congratulations. I didn't know you were pregnant. Wait, what do you mean it's twins?" I'd be like, guys, where have you been? So that's why you need to like continue marketing things, because you never know when people are going to see your content again. Um, I feel like I might have lost my train of thought here a little bit. Oh, yeah. So it's changed how I see myself, because now not only am I like an influencer and content creator outside of my business, that's mostly where I hang out now on my personal page, Brittany N Miller _ and I can talk about my book and sell my book. I now have a way to monetize that because I was making no money from that either. So it's kind of helped me have a little bit stronger of an identity and direction in that more like personal realm of content that I create. And it's also further reinforced my credentials as a business owner and marketing strategist, which is really cool. And like I said, it's changed fundamentally like the back end of my business now too, because I have a physical product that I have to um, invest in, because I have to order the books that I then have to market, that I then have to ship and sell or sell and ship, I guess. Yeah, so it's changed a lot, all for the better. It's just kind of some of these things that I didn't really think about when I was like, yeah, okay, let's do this. I just truthfully did it because I knew that from a personal sense of accomplishment, it was something that I wanted to do. And I knew that there would be benefits to both my business and my personal life doing it. But like, I didn't set out to be like, okay, the next best step for my business is to write a book. That wasn't where I came into the journey from, although lots of people do, because a business is truthfully a fantastic way to promote yourself as a business owner, you know, add some credentials, blah, 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 give you something that you can sell, kind of like an introductory item for people who maybe haven't worked with you before, kind of those sorts of things. It is a great logical business step for a lot of people, but that wasn't why or how I came into this journey. So now I'm just like, oh, it's time to put on our marketing strategist hat, Brittany, and do what you have done for clients before, but for yourself this time. Because I have worked with authors before. I have created sales pages and email sequences for them and suggested marketing materials and like all of those things. Like I know the how and the why. I just need to like sit down and do it, which has been very challenging in this season of life, but we're getting there. Okay, a couple quick things before I wrap up, because like I said, tangent. Talk a lot. Actually, we're doing better than I expected, time wise. So one piece of advice that I'd give someone who wants to write a book, do it. Just do it. Don't think about it too much. Your inner critic is going to come in and you're going to second guess yourself and you're not going to start. Just start. Literally just word vomit things onto a page. Come up with an idea that you are excited about and think you can write enough about, and then figure the rest out after. Because you do not need to have a book written before you go to a publisher and be like, I want to publish a book. Can you? Yeah, probably, but you don't have to. You can very much be like, this is something that I'd really like to do. And I think, truthfully speaking, they would probably even guide you through the ideation phase of figuring out like what it is that you should write about and could write about. But I do think that from just like an internal perspective, it's helpful for you when you go to the publisher and invest all this money to know what it is that you're going to kind of get out of the journey, excuse me, outside of having a book. Like, are you writing about something business related? Is it a memoir? Are you talking about your personal life? Those sorts of things. So I do think that spending some time thinking that through in advance can be very helpful. But like, you do not need to have a full on book. And also, I think the other thing is too, is like we overcomplicate it. So it's like when I sit down to write a book, I'm assuming it needs to be like 200 pages. Well, looking at Success Redefined, which I happen to have sitting in front of me, it's like 160 pages with like very large font, lots of spacing. It's really not as bad as you think it is. So I mean, each author had 3,000 a 3,000 word limit. I don't know whether everyone maxed out their word limit, but there are 11 chapters. So that's I'm bad at mental math, but like that's 33,000 words. That's not even that much, guys. I'm sure I say 33,000 words in a podcast episode. And you can literally do that too. You can just record yourself talking, transcribe it into text, and then like give it to an editor to edit it yourself, all of those things. It does not need to be as complicated as you're probably making it. If this is something that you're excited about potentially doing, then do it. Just do it. You can figure the rest out later. Well, and by later, I mean like once you're on the journey, but like get started, get committed, do it while you're excited about doing it. Also, definitely work with the Monarch and Co. Publishing House because, like I said, they are absolutely incredible. Pretty sure every single book that they've published so far has hit Amazon bestseller. Don't quote me on that because I'm not sure how many books they might have published last year while I was in pregnancy brain fog with baby number 5. But I know that the solo book that Amanda published herself, The Monarch, her signature 8 method for launching, I forget the rest of the title. I'll link it in the show notes. That hit bestseller. And then both of her co-authored books, One Decision Away and Success Redefined, that I was a part of, they both hit bestseller. And I know that they were launching 2 other books in June with solo authors or like a pair of authors. I think for the one of them was Magenta Me, and then the other one I can't remember the title of, but I'm pretty sure Magenta Me hit bestseller, and I think the other one did too. So I mean, they know what they're doing. Like 100%, they know what they're doing. They have a definitive strategy and like structure that they work you through that's really good for beginner authors. Um, and they typically get really good results. So definitely worth the investment from like a business perspective and from like a personal perspective to like go and do that. So check out their information. I will link it down below. But even if you're not interested in becoming an author right now, you should still like follow Amanda at the Monarch and Co. Because she has a lot of incredible business resources if you're a business owner. Like I'm part of her Monarch Momentum membership for female entrepreneurs, and it's great. I love it. You've probably heard me talk about it. I'll link more information about that in the show notes as well. But one last thing that I'll kind of like wrap up with, a question that they literally asked us on stage that night was, you know, is there going to be another book? Would you write again? And I'm like, absolutely, heck yes, 100% I would write again. Do I know whether it's going to be a co-authored book or a solo book? No, I don't. I definitely have ideas for both. I would love to write both. Right now, I think the biggest thing for me is the time commitment, knowing that I have twins coming soon. Although, truthfully speaking, if you are like pregnant or like newly postpartum, um, I find that the postpartum phase is like just a really great slowing down phase. And I have a lot of like ideas and inspiration, and it truly is like a great writing phase. That was when I wrote my chapter for Success Redefined when I was postpartum with Orion. So who knows? Maybe I'll be sitting down to write a book, either a chapter and leading a co-authored book, or maybe I'll work on a solo book for myself while I'm in the newborn postpartum phase with the twins. You never know. I like to surprise people and mostly myself. But I definitely would love to write again. I actually wrote a children's book a while ago. It's never been published. It's an idea that's sitting in a Word document. Um, it's been sitting in a Word document in my Google Drive folder for a very long time because it's a kid book and I need someone to illustrate it, and it just feels overwhelming to try and figure all that out. So I definitely am a writer and a talker and a creator and all of those things. And I know that I'm not done. I just don't necessarily know what's next yet. And I'm excited to figure that out. So I hope that you'll stick around and see what it is that I do next. We'll surprise everyone, including myself. But thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to this episode. If you ever have questions about the book itself or about writing your own book, I'm always happy to share my experience. Again, still technically a first-time author. You're probably better off talking to someone like Amanda, who has written more books, but I'm happy to kind of share my expertise and thoughts and opinions as well. So until the next episode of Go Get Great, thank you guys so much. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Go Get Great. I hope that you found some inspiration and practical tips to help you take your life and business from good to great. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to leave a review and subscribe so you never miss an episode. We've got so much more valuable content and amazing guests coming your way. And don't forget to follow us on social media for marketing tips and a whole lot of relatable mom content. You can find us on Instagram at Brittany Miller Socials and at Brittany N Miller _. And if you're ready to elevate your marketing game, I would love to work with you. Whether you need help with social media strategy, email marketing, or growing a podcast of your own, Brittany Miller Socials is here to support you every step of the way. Visit my website at www.brittnymillersocials.ca to learn more about how we can work together. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, keep going, keep growing, and go get great.